Hello, and once again, welcome to Making Known the Unknown. I'm your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me tonight are my experts, Sidney Schwartz, middle school teacher and Bible researcher from Hackensack, New Jersey, who drives all the way up to Connecticut from New Jersey every Friday to do this show. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi, Tina.
And Reverend Hewitt, founder and pastor of Gifts of the Spirit Church in Chesterfield, Connecticut, and medium. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
For those of you out there who may not be familiar with what the term medium means, or what it means to hold the title of a medium, we have prepared a little clip that we are using on a regular basis at the beginning of this show to explain to you exactly what that does mean.
In the Bible, Paul explains that everyone has two bodies, a physical body and a spiritual body. Mediums use their spiritual bodies when they act as a communication bridge between the physical and spirit worlds. As a spirit speaks, mediums hear the information using the ears of their spiritual bodies, then repeat the information to other physical people. Mediumship is synonymous with the biblical term, gifts of the Spirit. The focus of our show, Making Known the Unknown, is to provide knowledge through the use of Reverend Hewitt's mediumship and Sidney Schwartz's research. The Bible contains the history of psychic events, along with man-made doctrines created by priests centuries ago. This show will explore the untruths which the Bible entrenched into our society. By uncovering these untruths, we encourage people everywhere to think for themselves with a critical mind.
Okay, now that some of you have had a chance to see exactly what it means with respect to the title medium and how a medium gains their information from the spirit world, the topic of our show tonight is psychics are not mediums. I'm sure most of you out there probably use the term psychic and use it probably to refer to a multitude of things. And I have to tell you honestly that what inspired the topic of this show tonight is a television show that aired earlier this week on NBC. And the title of that show was Psychic Secrets Revealed. And as a result of that show and what it presented to the public, we would like to share with you exactly the difference between a psychic and a medium. We will be live tonight. For those of you who have been hesitant to call in the past, we'll be live at 889-1728 the entire hour. Hopefully some of you will be challenged when you hear some of the information that we have to share with you tonight, to call and ask questions. I can tell you that many people that I run into do make the comment that very few people do call into this show. And the only response I have with respect to that is that many people tell me that this information is so overwhelming and so new, but yet it rings so true, that most of them need to take the time to process this, something like being in shock, and it leaves them usually without much response. But we're hoping as time goes on that our viewers will become more educated and realize that quite a bit of the organized religion that they have been exposed to and brainwashed by from childhood is leaving them short in the world with respect to knowledge. And we're hoping to bridge the gap of knowledge here on this show. So I challenge you all personally to call and ask those questions. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Hewitt. And I can say one thing, after doing all of these shows with you, one statement I hear repeated all the time is that you do not like the term psychic. And I think tonight we are really going to uncover exactly why.
I don't like the word psychic because it's been tainted badly. Yet that word is in the dictionary. It means soul and mind. And since we're dealing with something that's invisible, just as the oxygen in this room, just as the wind outside, there's a lot of people that take advantage of people that are gullible, and all for money. But all the way back through the ages of time, people have taken advantage of other people. But there are other dimensions beyond that which we can see. I know what I'm talking about. And the thing that I stress all the time is to the people to think for themselves. Religion is something that I'm not too fond of. Even though I'm a minister, an ordained minister, and I studied for it, and I'm not proud that I'm a minister, because there's been such a cover-up with this work, tremendous cover-up. And this man to my right here, Mr. Schwartz, he was a skeptic and a scoffer and a stubborn man. And I will tell him to his face, why should I talk behind his back? And he set out to prove to the girl that he was seeing in college that there's no such thing. And I challenged him to challenge me to research himself, and he did. And he found out that there was a lot that was being hidden. And I'll never forget the summer months that he found out that even though his father had been gone about 2 years, how his father could work through a genuine medium, not a psychic, and talk directly to him, and he didn't think that was possible. But when he heard his father's voice, he said, there is no one on the planet that can fake his father's voice. And between the tears and the anger that was coming through him, and him kicking the dirt and everything else and swearing, and then I said, what in the world is the matter with you? Why are you so angry? And then he started hitting the priest and the rabbis and everybody else that he could think of, and how they've covered up and hidden it all from the public, you see. He started waking up. And I don't know of anybody on the planet. I don't care what labels they have. I don't care what church they walk into or what label they have over their door. This man knows more about the Bible, knows more about religions than anybody I have ever come in contact with. And today, you can't turn him back. He has researched and he knows the truth, and it has set him free. And he's the one that you should hit with some questions.
Thank you. I think we're going to go there next. It was Sidney who had called me to make me aware that this particular show was going to be on this past Wednesday.
Right.
And I'd have to ask you first and foremost, what was your first reaction when you started to watch this show?
Well, quite honestly, I was kind of amazed because I wasn't having much of a reaction. When I was watching it, to me, it was so obvious that they weren't talking about mediumship and they weren't talking about psychic phenomena, but they were really talking about magic, that I didn't have a reaction. I didn't get angry because I had expected I would have. But I was baffled about how obvious it was that this was magic and not psychic phenomena. Yet I know that the only reason I knew that is because I understand psychic phenomena. To other people, they wouldn't have that same reaction. One of the things I'd like to clear up is the word psychic and medium. But everybody's psychic to some degree. Everybody has some intuition that they tap into. They have some idea what something's going to happen. That's not mediumship. Mediumship is when you actually can communicate with someone in the other dimension, someone who has died, whose soul has gone on to live in another dimension. Unfortunately, this show was combining psychic things and mediumship, and they were implying that they were both can be faked. Mediumship has been faked throughout the years. There have been false prophets in the Bible. In Jeremiah, the spirits complaining about to prophesy against the women because they prophesy out of their own hearts, not out of my heart. They're not speaking God's words, they're speaking words from their own mind. So people have been faking this work for eons and eons and eons. But that doesn't mean that there aren't genuine mediums, and the true medium doesn't exist. The other thing that I'd really like to start talking about is the fact that because so much of mediumship is dealing with energy, and because energy is invisible, the average person cannot deal with it. They can't deal with what they can't see and what they can't feel and what they can't taste and can't hear. So that for them, they just can't understand it. So as a result of that, going back into very ancient times, magic and religion have always been combined. They're very close together, just as mediumship is also intertwined in there. That's not to say that magic and mediumship's the same. It's not. But people who can't understand the phenomena will say it's magic. My own mother went to one of these card seances. Her reaction was, it was magic. Okay, she could not accept the fact that it was genuine mediumship and that spirit was producing these cards, because her background in psychic science isn't strong enough, and therefore what you can't understand you label as magic. So many religious things, have magical aspects to them. If you go into think about the Catholic Church's rite of communion, from what I understand, the priest takes the hosts, which is a basket of crackers, and he puts it in this little box, and then hocus pocus, for some miraculous way, they're to turn into the body of Christ. Well, if you ask him how that happens, he can't really tell you that. Okay, it's more like one of these magic tricks, just like was on the show, where they cover it up, and then all of a sudden it's supposed to be changed, but is it or isn't it? Okay, so there's a lot of this is all invisible energy. You can take a cup. Like if a healer can take a cup of water and hold it in his hands and energize the water, and that water becomes healing water, and the person can drink it and feel energized from it. Can you see that happen? No, you can't see that happen. It's all invisible. Okay, just as the rite of communion is invisible. So is the energy there to really make it happen or not? Okay, is it magic or mediumship? Unless you're clairvoyant, you can't tell. I can't tell. This man can tell. He's clairvoyant. He can see what's going on. Okay, he can tell who's a legitimate medium because he can see the energy around them. He can see the lights around him, and know if the person who's really holding this water is really energizing it or not. I can't. Okay, so to me, I either have to have a deep understanding of how the phenomena works and get some sense of it, or I call it magic.
You mentioned second sight in the Bible, having second sight.
Well, having second sight is being clairvoyant, and that's one of the terms that is used for a clairvoyant, a person who's seeing with the spiritual eyes of the spirit body.
That's when Jesus in the Bible says, if you only had the eyes to see. He's referring to second sight. If you understood this and you read the Bible, then you'd understand all of his teachings. I'm talking about Jesus. He was the greatest of the greatest of the great. He was so gifted, and the priests were so jealous of him and his teachings that this is why they strung him on the cross, this horrible death. And even though he had died and gone into the other world, he selected another gifted person, which was Saul, and the church changed his name to Paul, and then they canonized him as a saint and used him as the medium, as they use me as the medium, and he started teaching the sciences, right? The sciences, even after he had gone on. And so this is why we have them in the Bible in chapter 14, 15.
15 of the first book of Corinthians.
In the first book of Corinthians. This is why it says, we're born with two bodies. And there's a place in there, you can quote that, where it tells you how to have a seance.
That's
in detail.
Chapter 14, starting with verse 26 on.
In detail. But now, up until the time he got connected with me, he did not know anything about the New Testament. The Jewish people are only interested in the Old Testament. And he found it very interesting when he got into reading about Jesus in the New Testament. There was all this stuff dealing with psychic phenomena. And now he knows more about the New Testament than I do, and I've read the thing back and forth and sideways.
Now, why isn't it that when I've gone into all the different churches that I have throughout my lifetime, I've never heard any minister talk about setting up a seance.
You got it.
Or creating a seance.
You got it.
And it's in the Bible.
Yes, it's in the Bible.
And another quick thought, and I know we have a lot to cover tonight. If people are ready because they can't see what goes on with mediumship and clairvoyance, then why do they so readily accept a God up in the sky in a piece of real estate that doesn't exist?
Because that's been validated for years and years and years by the priest. The priest kept saying it, and my grandmother believed in it, and my great-grandmother believed in it, my mother believed in it, and my father believed in it. Maybe I should believe in it too. It's been validated. Not that it's true, but
Right.
it has a social acceptability.
Like a folklore that's been passed on from generation to generation.
Exactly.
If we went back far enough, we'd find out that God was always within each human being. But the priest took God out and put him in a piece of real estate in the sky. It cannot be proved, cannot be disproved.
And when they put him in the sky, they said the way to worship the God is to bring him food, to bring him sacrifices. And they cooked the food and they ate the food. The priests were the ones eating the food, not the guy in the sky. So this was part of the reason. So when Jesus came along and said that God was within and started to do all this phenomena, he became a threat. So what did the priests do? They eliminated him. They killed him off. Just as they killed off many of the psychics, just like they killed off Joan of Arc. She was a threat to the French Catholic Church, because to the English Catholic Church, who was in charge of her at the time, and so they eliminated her. There came a point in history that the church lost its power and it can no longer kill off the mediums that are in existence. So now what they do is they try to kill the reputation, and what you saw on Wednesday night in this program was an example of that.
Now, that's exactly what I was going to mention next, because there was a gentleman on that show whose last name was coincidentally Edward.
Yes.
And he had his setup there with the audience very similar to what Jonathan Edwards does John Edwards does, excuse me, on Crossing Over.
Yes.
And I thought that was a direct hit or a direct attack.
I took it that way when he was doing it, because then they were trying to show how that could all be fake through interviews and gleaning knowledge from people. Well, I personally have been to I don't know how many message services where I've walked in and nobody's known me from Adam, and they come to me and they bring my grandparents through and everything else. On the cards that I got, Hoyt Robinette, who's the medium, he did not know the names of my grandparents, but yet they appeared on the card. I never told him. Nobody asked me any questions before I walked into that seance room, but yet they were there.
Viewers, I'm challenging all of you again. I know some of you out there saw that show Wednesday night. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, I know you've got questions. We have a real medium here for you to ask these questions of. Not an actor, and I have a little bit of information on one of those gentlemen that was portraying himself as a psychic there as well. Go ahead,
Let
Carl.
me mention this. Remember the show that we did here, and we brought this clip on dealing with Myrtle Beach and Charleston, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was broadcasted on TV and radio from Charleston for quite some time, and it was being heard in Myrtle Beach, and then when I arrived at Myrtle Beach to do a show before coming back to Connecticut, the churches, all the churches got together at Myrtle Beach and hired the police to surround my car and have me arrested and put in jail if I attempted to teach any of this at Myrtle Beach. And you know the story there. They wouldn't even allow me into the hotel where I was to appear that night. Now, doesn't that give everybody a question as to why? Because I was bringing a message to the people, the same message that Jesus tried to bring to the people, dealing with the gifts of the Spirit, that God was within. All of these clergymen was listening to this. Now, if what I was teaching was not a threat to them, they would not have got the police department there to arrest this singular person that was about ready to share some new information to the people. It was a very sad day for Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, melting pot of the southern coast.
Mm.
And then for him to step on that spike and to have his foot pierced, just like Jesus did. When, it was a direct parallel of what happened 2,000 years ago, except they killed Jesus, and as we said, the churches can't kill the mediums today.
And why? And it should cause a lot of people to wonder why this man, this great teacher, appeared to me. And I was in such denial, saying, I'm not even worthy of you. And I thought it was somebody else that was really faking. You know, I really did. And when he appeared to me and he proved to me who he was, and I broke down like a baby and cried hours. Then I felt ashamed, and he told me, don't ever be ashamed of shedding a tear, because it's the pearls of the soul. And he explained to me that the soul needs a climax. He explained that in detail to me, which is something I never heard of. And since then, I'm not afraid to shed a tear. I don't hide it anymore either.
I just find it interesting doing this work with the two of you, how so many people are so afraid of knowledge.
Scared to death.
Knowledge that will help them, help their future, help their present, understand their past, tie it together, and walk on the path that they should.
But that's because they've been taught, and it's been imprinted into their souls, that that anything dealing with this work is the work of the devil. It's in the Bible, where it talks about even on from the most highest levels of the spirit world, it can be the devil. So people are very afraid of this. Well, if they hear a voice that they can't see, they think it's the devil. They don't think it might be a spirit from on high or their grandmother who wants to get through to them.
Again, they can't see the devil, just like they can't see God. But they're willing to accept that, yet they wouldn't accept a medium.
Well, that's because it's in this book, and don't you know this book is exactly the truth of God? So many people said this comes directly from God. Well, there was a show on Larry King Live on last Sunday night where they had four ministers and a rabbi and an Islamic person there, and there was this fundamentalist there. He was breathing fire because this is exactly what Jesus says, and this is what he wants.
But Sidney, that's one Bible. How many are there in the world?
250.
So which one is the real one?
None of them.
None of them. They're all man-made.
They all have this man-made garbage put into them and the psychic truth. That's what people don't understand. Okay, they say this is the word of God and it came unaltered. Well, let me tell you, it's been altered plenty.
Terrible.
If you remember that show we did on Zephaniah a few weeks ago with all that language. Well, I just came across another Bible, and that's changed again, and there's another one to add.
Yet another version.
Yet another version.
There's so many people out there, I hate to say it, but most of the ones I'm talking about are Catholic. They're so afraid to think or ask questions. They think that a bolt of lightning is going to come right out of the sky and kill them if they even think or to ask a question, honestly. And there's some of them. Did you know a woman popped in my office the other day, stranger, she came in and she says, I recognize you, I've seen you on television, my husband and I watch your program every week, and she says, my husband sent me down here to hug you. I mean, out of the clear blue. And she ran over behind the desk and grabbed me and hugged me. And I said, where do you live? And she says, we live over near the Goodspeed Opera House. I says, I didn't know that signal reaches over there. She said, certainly does. And then we had a long talk, and she said, we really enjoy the show very much. And she said, my husband says it's the only thing that makes any sense. And I said, well, I'm certainly glad to hear that. And then they told us their background, where they're coming from, and she says, he turns all of this other stuff off, so this is the only one that makes any sense. We certainly hope that you don't discard the teaching.
Well, I'm glad some people are courageous enough to visit you and to tell you what they feel, as opposed to our viewers. I don't know. I've yet to be proven wrong. There's one thing I wanted to talk about, and that was one of the gentlemen who portrayed himself as a psychic, but then afterwards to reveal the secrets of what he did as a psychic. And I really found it very coincidental that this gentleman's name was Mark Edward.
Well, he also claimed he could communicate with the dead, which indicated that he would be a medium. He specifically used those words.
Now, we have talked about Jonathan Edwards here.
John Edwards.
John Edwards, excuse me. I keep doing that.
Yeah.
And I did find a bio on this Mark Edward from the internet, interestingly enough. I guess he didn't change his name, and this certainly is his face that I have here. And it says that his background, since the age of 11, was working through standard magic and mentalism, and he's associated with mysteries, magic, and miracles, and magic, fate, and a few other things. So I had a couple of thoughts around that. The first was, if this was really his career, and he's choosing to do this, why would he be on a show to try to undo it?
Well, let me mention something else here. I don't know, maybe I'm overstepping my bounds, but I went to an event one time, and the man's name, fabulous medium, and when he spotted the light around me, he got very nervous that I might blow the whistle on him. His name is Andre Coles, one of the greatest mediums for a long time that I'd ever met. And I was shocked, and yet I wasn't, when I went on the web and found out that he's under the jurisdiction of the Baptist Church. And his salary is $1 million a year. Baptist Church pays him $1 million a year.
Right now, to this day.
Yes, absolutely. And they've got him locked into that salary. That's a pretty darn good salary, isn't it?
Yeah.
$1 million a year?
Yeah.
And so he claims to be their
An illusionist.
But he doesn't call himself a medium. Oh, no. And but he goes all over the world, and he preaches, of course, about Jesus and all of that. So that's all right. But the way he covers up mediumship for the benefit of the Baptist Church is sickening as far as I'm concerned, because he's hiding the truth. He really is.
So this is the big question. Do you suppose some of the gentlemen on this show Wednesday night were on the payroll?
They're on somebody's payroll.
Of a significantly larger organization?
Oh, sure they are. Yes. They're on somebody's payroll. There's a priest not too far from here, miles, not in Connecticut, that is making a ton of money, a salary, and he has second sight. I was involved with him at one time. We were setting up an organization, and when the Vatican read that he was involved in this, they ordered him to resign, or else. This was back in the 70s, and he had to. But then he continued, but not under the label that we had organized. And the money kept pouring in, but they looked the other way, you see. And as long as the money pours in, they always cover it up in some other way. They camouflage it.
So it would seem that this man and maybe the others are riding both sides of the line.
Some of them do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Some of them do. If there's big money involved, their lawyers figure out some way that they can do it. They keep going.
They seem to me more like actors than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also found some of the things that they were doing
Well,
on
they
the
were
show.
Totally inaccurate. For example, there was one thing they were doing, a telekinesis. Now, telekinesis is when you concentrate with your mind to move an object. And they had this wine glass there, and they were supposedly demonstrating telekinesis. And what happened was the wine glass exploded. It didn't move, it exploded. And it turned out they had a spring that was there that came up and snapped the wine glass. Well, that's not telekinesis. Telekinesis was if the wine glass started to move across the table. The other thing they did was spoon bending. I happen to bring a spoon with me. If you could zoom in on this, if you could. Basically, what they did on the show was to do spoon bending, because they were obviously not doing the real thing because they weren't psychically gifted. They had made a cut right here, and they held the spoon like this, and they actually snapped it, and then the guy went like this, and the spoon fell apart. A real spoon, someone who can do that type of mediumship, like Uri Geller, he holds the spoon this way, and he just rubs it with his finger. And as he starts rubbing it, all of a sudden that spoon starts to bend. I've seen it done with keys, too. They just rub it with their finger. They're not holding it like this. They're not going like this. They're just with one finger right over there. So as soon as I saw that, I knew that wasn't the real thing.
Fake.
It was fake.
Well,
that whole show was fake.
I would imagine that any one of those participants in the audience, upon close inspection of some of these, I'm going to call them magic tricks, because it was really an insult to call them anything associated with mediumship, would have seen that.
Oh, exactly.
You know, it lends itself to television for that format, and it works well there, and it's very easy to show how they can manipulate things, but like you said, when you see it,
Yeah.
one-to-one, or when you experience a reading,
When you-
one-to-one, or a seance, one-on-one, it's a very different experience.
Well, his girlfriend in college, going all the way back, Bonnie, you know, in that book he talks about Bonnie. Well, when she came for the reading, well, she thought that I had 24 lawyers, no, 24
Investigators.
detectives that goes out and checks up on everybody and comes back and gives me all the data.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And he could
Right.
really afford to do that when he was charging $15 for the reading in
Yeah.
those days.
Right. You know, it's logical to be skeptical. That's fine. People should be skeptical of everything that they run into. But when you have seen it and experienced for yourself, you may still not believe it, but you know what? You're never going to forget it.
There's a woman in New London that used to say that because her girlfriend, her girlfriend was told that she was going to meet a certain man, you know, with certain hair and all that business, and she met him, and she married him. And she started these rumors that I tell these women something, and I stand on the street corner with a great big pole with a hook on it, and the right man comes along, and I reach out, I get him by the ankle, pull him in.
That would be funny.
Sure would be.
That would be a funny show. We could do that, you know?
Yeah, I could see myself going home with 2 black eyes.
You did make a reference to your book.
Yes.
And I want our viewers to see, if you could focus in on this. This is my first encounter with an angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom, by which both Sidney Schwartz and Carl Hewitt are co-authors. Buy this book. The number at the end of the show will get you in touch with how to do this. This will blow your mind. This is a foundation for this show at this time. There will be more books to come. But get this book. It doesn't do justice just to watch a 1-hour show. Get the book.
The
Thank
other
you.
book that the people may certainly will find of interest, and it certainly will, this book will eventually be printed in 34 different languages, is the book titled Crossovers, and it'll be the answer as to why homosexuals, people are homosexual, men and women. It's why men are sitting in women's bodies, why women are sitting in men's bodies, and it was created by a religion, and that's going to shock a lot of people. It was started by, created by a religion going back about 12,000 years ago in the country of Turkey. And I went with some of my students to Turkey to investigate, and we found exactly the place they told me to go and everything. He's a witness to that. Yeah. We got it all on film, every bit of it.
Now, what I'm hearing is an example of someone who's a researcher,
Yeah,
someone who's a minister,
yeah.
who had gotten some information, and they went and researched it. They didn't just pick up a Bible and read it, and because they read it, it was so. You have traveled
We've
and
been
researched
everywhere.
Yep.
and confirmed and documented all of this throughout your lifetime.
Church pays me nothing, absolutely no salary, no nothing. My desire is to find the truth and to teach it to the people. Because when he talked to me, and I realized who it was, I said, I'm going to go forward and teach what you want me to teach. And he said that all other things will be given unto you if you teach what I ask you to teach. And so I asked him, we had what I call a hot discussion, because I wanted to know why you haven't appeared to the Pope, or why you didn't appear to this one or that one or the other. And he said something very heavy, and this is going to surprise the listeners out there right now. He says, I have nothing to do with those religions. They're all man-made because they have not carried out my work. I came to the world to teach the gifts of the Spirit. I taught my students the gifts of the Spirit. And he says only 3 of them developed to my satisfaction, Peter, James, and John. The others did not develop. And he said, you questioned as far back as when you were very small, And he says, I knew you before you were placed in the womb. And he says, I'm not the only one working with you, and you know it. And I do know it. There are others that have identified themselves way back, but he never did. When I asked who is talking to me, and he said, it's not important. It's only recently, 1999? 1999. And then I was in denial. And then he said, I'll prove it to you. That was when the picture here. But then I said, well, there's a lot of people, a lot of men with this kind. And you know, the first person that was Matthew Manning. Matthew Manning's picture looks so much like him. So he brought in Judas, the kiss of death. And then I felt like a fool that I refused to believe it was him. And then when it all sank in, boy, did I ever go in the woods and spend a lot of time by myself.
So even you have been a skeptic.
I have been a skeptic all my life.
You think for yourself.
I do, I certainly do.
I wouldn't consider you brainwashed.
I used to walk out of the church as a little boy and leave my father in there, and my father would run and try to chase me because he would have beat the daylights out of me. But then he would never catch me because I had long legs. Then he'd feel sorry for me.
I'd like to read something from the Bible.
Okay.
It's John chapter 14, verses 1 and 2. Let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe in me, also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you, for I go to prepare a place for you. The second one is, in my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. I find it very significant that one of the few things that Jesus has specifically come back and told Reverend Hewitt is that this verse is wrong, because it says, if it was not so, I would have told you. He said that in my Father's house are many dimensions. He corrected this. He hasn't corrected too many others. He has told us that the Bible's full of changes. He hasn't enumerated what they are, but he did do this one, and I think it's because it's the way this one's worded. If it wasn't so, I would have told you so. And he has now. So I just wanted to bring that up since we were talking about Jesus.
He said the dimensions are similar to what we understand in our electronics today. He said that the priest created that because they were meeting in a mansion. And by creating this thought in the minds of the people, if they were good and they did exactly what the priest told them to do, and they died, then they would be given a mansion to live in. Because they were so poor, they never could have a mansion while they were alive. So if they did what they wanted them to do, they would have a mansion in the other life. So he said no such thing. He says, in my Father's house are many dimensions. And the dimensions we create here, not there.
Okay. I know that there are some open-minded people in Norwich. There have to be some. You can't all be closed-minded and brainwashed.
But
You must be watching the show.
But there's so many people out there that are afraid to talk, to ask questions.
I can also reassure our viewers that if you call in, you don't need to give your real name. You don't need to give a name at all. We wouldn't do that to you. This is about knowledge. This is not about someone hearing you. You're hearing your name announced over the television and then retaliating upon you. And then when you go to church on Sunday, your friend might say, oh, what were you doing calling in?
Yes,
you don't need to worry about that.
Yes, but there's someone telling me here that a lot of the people are afraid that their other members of their family will recognize their voice if they call in.
I guess that's the risk you have to take if you want to open your mind, or if you want to remain a sheep in the corral. That's fine.
But there's a lot of the people listening to this program that are opening their mind.
That's good to know.
In a few more months, there'll be more calls coming in and we can answer.
I'm a little surprised, though, that there aren't more skeptics calling in. My God, we are here for you to ask questions and to pick. But again, I don't see any courage.
They're telling me here that the people would rather listen to us than to ask questions.
Okay, good.
That is that's a nice compliment right there.
Okay, good. Very good.
They're hearing things they've never heard before from their own clergyman.
There was something else on the show that I wanted to bring out, because I know that, Carl, you do this yourself. And one of the gentlemen there was claiming to do remote viewing. And I know in a recent show we had discussed how even remote viewing is used in the government. And one of the first flags that went up with me was, are they saying that what our own government uses is not true, and they're expecting that to go on television and get away with that? What do you have to say about that?
Well, the religion in this country don't want the government to admit that. You see, if the government admits it, that means the religion is going to get upset towards the government. So
Okay.
you see, one hand washes the other here.
All right.
That's the way it goes.
Okay. I see we do have a caller, so let's see what our caller wants to ask. Hi, caller.
Hi.
Go right ahead. You have a question?
Not really a question. I just wanted to set your mind at ease that people are listening very carefully to everything that you're saying.
Okay.
And I, for one, would rather just listen to everything you're saying rather than formulate a question.
Okay.
I do want to thank you for mentioning just how many versions of the Bible there are. I always knew that it was a very censored document, and I knew that there were different translations. I had no idea how many.
Well, I've studied over 250, and there's about another 50 out there that I haven't gotten to yet.
That's
So
incredible.
I'm sure there's close to 300.
Do you have any kind of recommended reading list in addition to your own book that would get someone started on this kind of a journey?
You could start by reading, what's the one by Bishop Pike you used to give?
The other side.
The Other Side by Bishop Pike. Also, Ruth Montgomery's books.
I wouldn't recommend her books.
Well, her beginning books were pretty good.
Beginning one, yeah.
I read Ruth Montgomery back when I was in high school.
Right, right.
I still have several of them.
James Van Praagh is also very good.
Okay. What was the first one you mentioned? I'm writing this.
The Other Side by Bishop Pike.
Okay.
Bishop Pike is a very interesting book. Did you have you ever?
No, I have not.
Bishop Pike was the bishop of the Episcopalian churches, and he was one that was a skeptic, a scoffer, and his son committed suicide at 20 years old.
Wow.
And his son came back and proved to him that he was still alive in another dimension.
Wow.
And it changed his life completely. And it's quite an interesting book. He wrote that book before he himself died.
Okay.
And I'm sure if the people can't find it, it can be found on
Amazon.com.
Amazon.com.
There's also a book, I think it's called The Story of Prophecy. The author's name is Foreman, F-O-R-E-M-A-N. And that's also a good book about different people who made predictions through many different points in time.
Okay.
Also, Arthur Finley. Anything that Arthur Finley wrote is fabulous. Nothing better on the market.
Rock of Truth, The Unfolding Universe.
Could I suggest maybe that the viewers could call the number at the end of the show too? Because as I've witnessed, you have a huge library
Yeah.
Yes.
in the church to pull from. And with that, caller, I have to move on. We do have another call.
Thank you.
And I thank you. Hi, caller. Go right ahead.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'd like to make a couple of comments or
Okay.
ask a couple of questions, if I may.
Okay, go
One of the
ahead.
reasons why a lot of people don't call in, I think, is because it's just like on television or anywhere else or any other radio show, we really get cut off awfully quick. What happens is you want to try to please everyone, so when you get a lot of calls, I mean, some people really want to be heard for some time, and I happen to be one of those people, but, you know, you have to share and share alike, you know, and let other people get on the program.
Right.
And then what happens is you get 3, 4, or 5 calls come in, you think you're going to get overloaded for the night, so you start cutting people off to maybe with one question, and then it bombs out. No one else calls, and you say, well, why do they cut me off so quickly? But I think that's one of the reasons why I get a little disturbed with that. And directly not answering the questions. I like your show because, right, wrong, or indifferent, you really do answer the questions. I was an individual that called a few weeks ago about the fascinating statement about the fact that wherever we're going and however we're going to get there, we're going to be 30 years old. And that was the first time I had ever heard anything like that, and I was overly impressed with that. But I want to share a story not sure I totally understand. I understand the Reverend claims he met with Christ. Is that what you're saying? Is that what it was all about? Is that what you
Yes.
said?
Yes, actually, Jesus has been speaking to you, Carl. This gentleman was asking that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have a real problem with that, and forgive me for saying that because who am I to question? But it's just.
You're not the only one, sir.
But I want to tell you a cute story, and that you might enjoy about this. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, I bought a place on a pond, and I ended up finding out later, about a month later, that a friend of mine I served in Vietnam with was 2 houses down, and he had done quite a turnaround with his life and became a Baptist minister. I mean, late, at the age of probably, I'm going to say 47 or 48 at the time, maybe 50. And we were sitting we used to build fires every night, 6 or 7 families, and we'd just watch the sunset, and it was interesting. Just a wonderful place for us for a while. And we were sitting there one night, just he and I, we were talking about our childhood playing baseball together and going through some tough times and what have you. I said, listen, you're a minister now, and your life has changed, and you're really happy with your life. It's really great for you, and I really have so many questions. What would it be like right now if Christ walked up from the water, or if we had a thorn bush? I love the thorn bush story. It's always a thorn bush. It's never the Empire State Building or anywhere else. But anyway, I said, how would you know? I mean, wouldn't you just say, I think we're going to lock you up tonight. You belong in jail. I mean, who are you to say you're Christ? And we talked, and he said, that is true. I don't know. I'd have to question that. Even as a minister, I'd have to question that right now. And I find that, I mean, isn't that really true? I mean, think of Christ appearing right now at Yankee Stadium. I mean, he'd be in cell block 1 in the Bronx. I mean, how do you, and these miracles, as you told musicians, I mean, they can make elephants disappear, they can do this and do that. So, I mean, there are fantastic musicians in the world that somebody that would say that they are could do some of these strange things and really make it be. And please don't get upset with me, but I find it very difficult to believe that you, in fact, the kind and good person that you are, are the only guy, at least I'll say in my lifetime, that Jesus Christ has come down and had a conversation with. I mean, you got to admit that's a tough thing to grab. I'll hang up and let other callers call in. And thanks for giving me the time, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. The thing is, he told me one time, out of the clear blue, he says, your civilization on your planet, your religions, your churches, will always tell you people to pray to God, talk to God. But if you hear a voice and it was God talking to you, it's not right. Stop and think of that. It's all right to talk to Jesus or talk to God wherever he or she is. But if that God talks to you, it's not right. Stop and think of that.
Yet in biblical times, it was all right, because back in Exodus chapter 33, about verse 7, it specifically says, and anyone who had a question of the Lord would go out to the meeting tent, and they would have a two-way conversation with the Lord. So in those days, it was okay. But since mediumship has been driven so far underground and has been tainted with the word psychic and things like that, so people can't believe that anymore, the people think that it's not possible anymore.
I have to say that I really admire the courage of the caller who
I
just
do
called
too.
in.
I do.
And the one thing that people don't have to be afraid of is that we would be, or you would be offended by any question.
Doesn't
Because
bother me a
that's
bit.
not the premise for this show at all.
But there's one thing I want to say in response to what he said, his call. I am not a bit different now than I was before the communication with this great person. I'm still the same person. I'm sure that there's a lot of people who would think that they're the high and the mighty communicating with such a great person.
Well, sure, someone's ego would take off
Yeah.
Sure.
with that information, and they could use it and turn it into lots and lots of money, I suppose.
This, as you know, this person, this picture here is back behind the podium. I go down to in the chapel, and I walk in, and I says, "Love you, man," and I go about my business, you know. And when I go into meditation and I go into the valley within my mind, I meet him in the valley in my mind. And oftentimes there's not a word said, not a word said. We meet and oftentimes hug each other, and he keeps going his direction, and I keep going my direction. Not a word said. Sometimes there is, sometimes not.
It is an awesome thing to grasp, to handle, to conceptualize that Jesus has spoken to you, and you yourself have expressed that over and over and over again. But then when you sit in on one of these seances, and if we have a couple minutes, I might mention that gentleman is coming back to this area again, who produces these cards through his mediumship. And some of our viewers would have a chance to sit in on that and see it for themselves.
That great medium is coming back in June, and if anybody's interested, they have to have reservations, because last time he was here, I turned away between 400 and 500 people.
Really?
And I would never have anybody unless they were genuine, never. And there's no such thing as sitting in the dark. Everything is done in the light. And never would I have anybody unless they were genuine, because I go test them out first. He was with me the first time. We even changed names so that no one would recognize me by hearing my name. They might have read about me in a paper, magazine or something, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I said, I don't want anybody to recognize me, and we checked everybody out, and we met some wonderful mediums. There was a few of them that I call flunkies. I don't bother with those.
And these mediums weren't messing around with trying to find the knife under the cup,
No.
or changing the coil a different color,
No.
or reading cards.
None of that.
No. Okay. Well, that's good. Sidney, did you have something to add?
Can't be bothered with that.
Going back to Carl's communication with Jesus, when Jesus talks with him and appears to him, it's clairvoyantly. It's not like he's standing there so that anybody else could see him. In the Bible, on the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah appeared to the students there. It was the same type of thing. Those would have been the prophets of old coming back, and they were talking to them. And Jesus specifically told them afterwards, "Don't tell anybody about this," because he knew that people wouldn't believe him. You know, that they just wouldn't understand. And even though the Bible in the New Testament, I believe it's in the book of Mark, I believe, or in Matthew, it says that the students were afraid. They were so terrified they didn't know what they were saying. That was inserted in there later because they knew exactly what they were saying when they said they needed the three tents. They needed the 3 cabinets to produce that materialization. But he specifically told them not to speak of it, and that's because people have, again, going back to what we started out with, people have a hard time believing what they can't see themselves.
You see, Jesus lives in a timeless dimension. My relatives, the ones that are not asleep over there, they live in a timeless dimension. And when we pass from this plane, we go into a timeless dimension. We live in a time flow ourselves. This is why we deal with the clocks and that type of thing.
Now, the other thing that I wanted to point out is that we have talked about Jesus the man in other shows because he was a living human being.
That's right. He was married too, and he had 2 children.
Right. It's almost as if he got turned into something that is like a god.
Yeah.
And so for people not to be able to grasp that, I would imagine also comes from that aspect that he was turned into something that was untangible, inhuman, superhuman, and he was a man. He was a real living man who died. He died a horrific death, needless to say.
I have been told by him that I have to move to a certain place in the south, in the mountains of North Carolina, which I'm going to go to. And I hope, and I will have a school there, and I hope to have from 30 to 50 small children where their parents are not going to brainwash them that anything like this is the devil. I want those kids to be open, and I want to teach them that God is within themselves. They will become the greatest mediums that has ever been since Jesus' time. They'll be the instruments of the Spirit because the world, this world that we live on, is going to go into a new age. And so the age of man, the kingdom of man, will become the kingdom of God in the future.
That would be a wonderful thought.
This is what it's going to be. He told me so.
You know, something else occurred to me too here. We only have a few minutes left of the show, but everyone puts Jesus on a pedestal. And I'm not saying that he was not an awesome man and he did not possess awesome gifts. But this is from the Christian perspective. We don't hear people who are Muslims necessarily talking about Jesus.
But wait a minute.
Do we?
All these other great people before him, he was the 16th Savior God. All the rest of them said to the people, what you see me do, you can do.
So Allah, Buddha, all of them.
This is why he selected 12 students to teach them the gift of the Spirit. That's what he taught them in the upper room. But some of these guys were flunkies, some of his students. As I said before, Peter, James, and John were the only ones that were developing to be mediums, those days prophets. This is why he selected them to go up on the Mount of Transfiguration to witness Moses and Elijah coming back and materializing. It's in the Bible. This guy was a little bit shocked when he read about it. Yeah.
Okay. Would I love to talk more about this subject?
It's everything I teach is in the Bible. In the Bible. And there is no such thing as the devil. That was created garbage.
Okay.
And there's no such thing as hell. That was created. It was all created by the priest in the month of June in the year 325 at the Council of Nicaea.
Thank you.
And I hope that every one of those priests are swimming in their own garbage, wherever the hell that might be. And I'll bet you a lot of people are passing judgment on me because of what I just said. I don't care.
So be it.
There's a certain part of me that I can't help.
Well, I would love to continue along this line, but we've got to wrap the show up. We only have so much time left tonight.
Let's do it. I've been so angered since Wednesday saying that show. That's why I wore red.
I want to thank my guests, Sidney Schwartz, Reverend Carl Hewitt. Thank our viewers, especially those who were courageous enough to call in.
Yes.
Yes.
Don't forget that at the end, you will see our email address, making_known@yahoo.com. There's a phone number, and talk to your friends and relatives because this show is going everywhere they can show it. And with that, we'll see you next time. Be well.